idea has been bouncing around in Missoula for the last 5 years or so. And we're finally at a place where we're working with a number of representatives from the neighborhoods, and it's an open process. Cynthia Manning, who's the chair of the Historic Preservation Commission, is kind of managing the process in terms of facilitating it. But what we're doing is we're going through a draft that has evolved out of a number of years of work, literally line by line by line, and looking at such things as what we want these neighborhoods to be, how we want them to, if they're going to change, how do we want them to change. We're looking at things like building height. Right now, the existing building height in some of the areas is really rather large, rather tall. Right where we stand, you could build a 100-foot tall building. So the question we're asking is, do we want to have a 100-foot tall building in this particular neighborhood? Now, one of the interesting things about doing a 100-foot tall building is that you would have to provide an enormous amount of parking. So if there were a desire to build a 100-foot tall building here, you might have to clear some buildings out to create the parking to enable that building to happen. But given the property rights that we have, if someone were to come in and say, okay, I'm going to buy this block, I'm going to doze these buildings, I'm going to build a 100-foot tall building, and I'm going to build a parking structure next to it, our code would allow that, as long as you met the setbacks, the landscaping requirements, and a couple of other things. Does that make any sense? Or, I mean, that's how our codes are written. The same thing is true in some of the other areas. Along the railroad tracks, for example, when zoning first happened in Missoula, the railroad tracks were all designated industrial zoning, as industrial areas. It just so happened that lots of people built houses along the tracks. That's just how life happened. In the old zoning that we had, you couldn't repair or restore a house in the industrial zone. But you could build a 50-foot tall industrial building on that same site. So now we've fixed the zoning a little bit, and you can repair and get financing for residential buildings in what's called the D zoning district. But we don't have any standards to suggest what should happen if development happens in the D district next to the historic districts that we have, for example, along the west side of the McCormick district. There's no way to know how one could fit with the other. So this is an attempt to see how, and maybe we can. I mean, it's entirely possible that this won't work. But to see if we think we can develop some standards for adding on to buildings in these residential neighborhoods and in these commercial areas in a way that makes architectural sense and fits in with the character of the communities as they have evolved over the last 100 years. So that's kind of the process that's going on. We're having another meeting on this where we'll be looking at the idea of how tall buildings ought to be in these neighborhoods. Tomorrow night here at 5:15, if any of you are interested in coming. We'll be here from 5:15 to 6:15. We have this meeting every 2 weeks, and we are done at 6:15. So, I mean, we do try, and Gwen is one of the participants in this process, and there are a number of other people who have been to these meetings in the past who also are. We're looking at building height, we're looking at building coverage, which is a notion that we don't have in our zoning right now. And that's how much building should occupy how much of a site. Historically, we have data that tells us that in the residential neighborhoods, we really don't use more than 30% of our sites, of the actual parcels that we have, for buildings. That's data that we have, and we've sampled a bunch of neighborhoods over the years. So we know a lot about what's going on simply by mapping. And we can look historically at how the neighborhoods grew and evolved by using the Sanborn fire insurance maps. And we can do the same analysis with those maps. So we can go back into the 1880s and look at this notion of how much building is enough building. It just happens that on small lots and on large lots, this percentage doesn't exceed about 30%. Now that's an interesting figure because it means that about 70% of the lots are open space, even the small lots. What that does is it creates a certain amount of breeze, and it creates a certain amount of separation building to building and an amount of open space inside the private parts of the neighborhoods. So as a design consideration in neighborhoods, we're thinking about that. We don't know if it's something we can get through, but I think if you look around your neighborhood, you'll notice that there's a certain amount of open space historically,
And then there are recent developments that you can tell, because they're the newer buildings, that don't have that same ratio of building to open space. So that's an interesting notion to think through. We're looking at simple notions like buildings should have their front doors on the street. Our codes don't require that, but most of us know that the neighborhoods that we have here have front doors on the street. So we're suggesting that there actually be required front doors to be on the street. Now that doesn't seem like a big deal, but it has a lot to do with neighborhood safety and security, because it means that that public-private space between the property line and the front of the house has an opening that people come and go from. There's no need to sneak around to the side door, and there's no way that by going around to the side door, you could actually have someone trap you there. There's this notion of defensible space is something that's been studied by architects and law enforcement people for at least 30 years that I know about. And it's an interesting notion because it suggests that there are safe ways to build neighborhoods, and they have design considerations. So that's just one reason, aside from the sheer friendliness of architectural design in that way. We're looking at setbacks, how the setbacks really should work instead of how the codes actually require them to work. Again, this seems like a simple thing until you go to build a second story on your house and you realize that your building has a 5-foot setback and that the zoning requires you to have a 7.5-foot setback or even more. So what do? You have to go to the Board of Adjustment to put a second story on a building that's been there for 100 years. Well, maybe that's not the easiest way to get the job done. Maybe there's a better way to do it. So we're looking at that. Also, the commercial buildings along here, for example, are required to have a 10-foot front yard. You notice that most of the commercial buildings have no front yard. That's how they happen. To build another building along here, or even to put a second story on this building, it would have to be set back 10 feet. That's the code. So we're looking at ways to change that so that when the historic pattern on a block has a certain setback established, then that's the setback for the block, going block by block by block. Building height's the same way. If there's a predominant, low-level block, maybe that block should have a limitation below what the zoning should be. If there's a block that has all the buildings are higher than the existing zoning would allow, maybe that limitation should be higher. We don't know, but that's a notion that we're talking about. We're also talking about a couple of other things, which include parking requirements, roof shapes consistent with existing roof shapes, so buildings don't have every imaginable roof shape on them. If you're looking at a notion of kind of consistency, things looking like they belong with other things, sometimes that pattern recognition works in architecture. So that's another notion. One of the other things we've talked about in terms of building height is the fact that we have a number of important buildings around the neighborhood, and they form the skyline. The school administration building, or what we call it now, the Babs Apartments, the Milwaukee Depot, its tower, Hellgate High School, the Presbyterian Church. These are formative elements on the skyline of the neighborhood, something that probably you don't think about at the top of your mind senses, but those things are there. So a suggestion has been made that those things remain the skyline, that we still have that historic skyline. If you look at this part of town from the overpass that goes to the north side, you'll see something pretty interesting. The historic skyline is the older buildings. And it's a great place to take a look at how Missoula is and why it is where it is. So that's a notion that we might think about in terms of urban form, in terms of the way that we look at how Missoula is going to change or how it's going to stay the same. An interesting problem. One of the other things we're looking at is something called a demolition delay. We've heard a lot about scraping of buildings. In this draft, it suggests that there be an 18-month demolition delay for any historic buildings that contribute to the historic districts in the area. That gives the owner 18 months to figure out how to either keep the building and adapt it to new uses, or if they can't do it, then they can demolish it. But it's something that happens in a lot of historic districts, and it's a way of conserving the resources in the neighborhood and trying to recycle the sort of the remains that we have of those buildings within the neighborhood as well. And we'll also, on another level, be looking at how to assist people in doing those kinds of things. And that's part of what we do with the Historic Preservation Commission. So those are just some of the things we're doing in terms of the historic district overlay. As we see it now, and as we've been talking about it, and I've got a handout, frequently asked questions about historic overlay zones. I've got about 10 copies. If anybody's interested, I'll pass those around first. You guys start. And the way that we're thinking this through is that there are a lot of common elements. So we're thinking that there's one overlay zone for these 3 districts. And then within that, there are 3 specific sections that apply to what's unique about the McCormick district, to what's unique about the Southside district, and then to what's unique about the university area. Each of these neighborhoods grew at the same time, but they didn't grow the same way. They all began from about 1890 and were almost built out in terms of the forms that we know and buildings that we know by World War II. That's just what happened. And they happened incrementally. In many ways, they happened closest to downtown, and they moved south. So if you look, for example, in the university, you can see buildings, tall buildings here and short buildings down here. That's just what happened because it happened over time. Architectural styles changed, the Depression changed, the economy in Missoula changed. A bunch of things happened that caused those architectural changes in the neighborhoods. So there are consistencies in terms of the way the neighborhoods were built, and there are differences in terms of architecture. So that's something that it looks like it's necessary to recognize for each of these areas. As you probably know, lot sizes are different in these neighborhoods than they are here. And that also contributes to neighborhood development and neighborhood character. So we're looking at those kinds of questions too. So I would invite anyone, all of you, to come and participate in this process. Again, we have a meeting tomorrow night at 5:15. It'll go till 6:15, and we're going to be talking about building heights in the neighborhoods. So with that, I'll also pass around draft copies of the overlay as it is to this point. This is a very marked up version. It literally is a work in process, and we are literally going line by line and page by page. If you want copies and there aren't enough to go around of any of these things, you can call me or email me. And I've got a sign-up sheet here, which I'll also pass around if anybody wants to contribute to this or participate in the process. Is that enough time?
You have 10 more minutes, so if you want to take questions.
Sure. I'm brave.
I was just going to comment, I think we have a link to you as well on our website.
Oh, okay.
So if anybody wants to go to the Riverside Neighborhood Council website, you have a link where you can go and see what they're doing with the historic overlay.
And other things. And I've also got business cards here if anybody wants.
State your name again.
My name,
Yes.
Philip Meckling,
Spell last.
Maecchling. Maecchling. So, yeah, Michael.
Sorry, I was probably not up to speed, but the frustration with working on planning documents, I assume that's what we're talking about, and then we get the zoning issues.
This is zoning.
We're talking about zoning.
That's correct. This is an overlay zone that adds and removes, it conditions essentially the underlying zone. So in the R1 area, for example, if the current setbacks are 7.5 feet and the R1 area wants to retain that, then they'll retain that. If it were decided that the setbacks should be on the side yards 5 feet, or that the rear setback should go to the alley, which is traditional for garage buildings and carriage houses and so forth, then those setbacks would be changed for certain areas so that you could build back the buildings that were built there first, if that's desirable. And that's a question that I won't answer for you because I don't know that. But in terms of zoning, this is zoning. So if it is adopted, it is what you have to comply with to get a building permit or to get a business license. That may sound onerous, but frankly, that's the way it is right now. So it's not.
Then has teeth in it.
That's correct. Yeah.
How would they make that change? Would that be done at the city level through the council, or would that instead be done like traditionally been done, where you get 60% of the neighborhood to vote for it? Which way would it be?
The way the process works for zoning is the way it works for any zoning in the city. And that's that there's a process like this and and other processes, and a draft comes out of that process, and that's presented to the planning board for public hearing and consideration and a recommendation to the city council. The city council then holds a public hearing and has meetings with its plat annexation and zoning committee and looks at the good things and the bad things and deliberates it, and then they actually vote on it. There is a protest provision, and that protest provision could be 20% of the, I can't remember the provision now for how much of the actual ownership it is. It's in our code someplace, but 25% of the entire property, or 20% of all the adjacent property. So if people outside of this overlay zone objected to it, then they could protest that. That would then require the city council to have what is called a supermajority of the council sitting that night, which is 2/3. So I think that's right, Luann, is that 2/3 of the sitting council? It used to be a mandatory 8 votes. So if you had 9 people, you couldn't get 8 votes, you didn't get it, or you got it. Any other questions? And again, we're hoping for as much participation as we can get. We're also hoping to get 12 votes on the city council to show that this is a good idea, if it is a good idea. And we're also not interested in working on it if it isn't a good idea. So this is not something that I'm overjoyed to be doing, if you think I am.
Actually, quickly,
Yeah.
just to get people's attention, is it true that the down here in South Higgins is basically an extension of the downtown business district, so that we could have 100-foot buildings all along South Higgins?
Only in the areas that are Zone C, which is this block up to, what's that?
Much of these first 3 blocks.
Yeah, these blocks up to the high school, up to Brooks.
Because that often gets people's attention when they realize that there's a block from here and they come over here and they say, wow.
There is a little bit of, yeah, there's a slight disconnect in some ways between what we know of as the comprehensive plan or the growth policy and what it designates this area as. And this area was also part of Urban Renewal District 1, which goes, of course, most of it was across the river. So from a procedural standpoint and a funding standpoint, in terms of tax increment, financing and use, this area was linked to the downtown. And in the comprehensive plan, it is talked about as part of the central business area, but it's not zoned central business district. The central business district zoning is across the river and goes all the way to the railroad tracks. So, and
Would
it's
this show that?
yeah. But there are areas, if you look at this map, you'll see that all the areas that are Zone C, and that's both sides of the street of Higgins, all the way up to Connell, which include the high school, have a building height limit of about 100 feet. I can't remember exactly, but it's in here. But anyway.
How many stories is 100 feet?
That would be 10 stories, more or less, maybe 9, maybe 8. The Wilma is not 100 feet tall.
No.
So it's not. So, I mean, so it would be tall buildings, which is not what is traditional for this neighborhood. Also, Orange Street is zoned C commercial and would allow half a block in on the west side, very tall buildings, if someone could figure out how to deal with the rest of the code constraints. So, and not easy on Orange Street. We know that Orange Street really needs its own design standards because it's so tight.
Do you have any idea what the intent was when they first said that? I mean, was it because they expected buildings to be built? That I can't imagine that they expected that to happen.
You know, I don't know the intent. When zoning happened in Missoula, this entire neighborhood here was zoned C commercial. And in the 1970s, in 77 or so, that zoning was changed for part of it to R2 from commercial zoning. And the C zoning also went further down Higgins Avenue, I think. We've got it in old hand-drawn, hand-colored maps.
It'd just be fascinating to have, I mean, what their notion of growth was supposed to be.
Well, I
what
think
they thought was going to happen.
my guess would be that their notion of growth would be that things would grow. I mean, that's how cities have grown. And so how do we let it grow and let it happen and let the marketplace happen is probably their notion. And then in the 1970s, there was a change in thinking about these neighborhoods in particular, and their zoning was changed from A to R1 over here, and from from C here, and I think there was some other zoning here, but it was pretty much C to R2. The basic zones in Missoula were A, B, C, D, and BC. A was residential, single family, and apartments. B was multifamily. C was commercial. D was industrial. And BC was some hybrid of residential and commercial. They called it neighborhood commercial. And that's how it was up until about 1965 or so. And from then on, we now have over 1,000 zones. So we went from 5 to 1,000 in somebody's generation. Any other questions? We also have a historic preservation awards program that we do. Some of you may have participated in it. Some of you may have received awards. And I've got ballot sheets here for that. If you know of a building or a person who you feel has been outstanding in terms of historic preservation, restoration, or renovation of the building, or a person who has contributed to the preservation of historical and cultural things in the Missoula community, nominate them, and the commission will entertain the idea. And we have an event every year. We usually have about 100 people who come to the awards. This year we're hoping that it will be at the City Club, which will be address a different audience, and we can talk about preservation to a different group of people. So, thank you. And shall I leave this map here? Or?
Do you guys want him to leave the map here?
Sure.
Huh?
I could use it during my presentation if you want.
Oh, sure.
Leave it.
Yeah. Great. But then we'll bring it back.
Yeah.
The black part of the handle.
On the black part?
It's all black. Little slide.
Oh, it's secret. This way I don't have to yell.
Yeah.
Even though I know how. And if anybody has trouble hearing at any time, please feel free to raise your hand and yell. Can't hear you. And that way, you know. Okay. Next we're going to have a little discussion and presentation from Brent Campbell and the WGM group. This is regarding the mill site development. And here you go. I don't have a lot to say. Do you want this?
Actually, I've got a drawing here, and can everybody hear me okay? I project fairly well. I'll try to remember to do that. I got a drawing of the existing, or the current kind of conceptual design for the area, and I'm filling in tonight for Nick Kaufman, who is the planner from WGM on this project. I'm the project engineer. I also want to introduce Dale McCormick from the Office of Planning and Grants, who's our case planner on this project, and has been pretty intimately involved in putting together this this plan. Just for my own information, how many of you are fairly familiar with this plan and the layout and the development of this? We've been working for the last probably 3 or 4 months on this plan. Just a quick show of hands. People generally pretty familiar. I'll give a quick update. Okay, I'll give a quick overview and update as to where we've been and where we're going on the project. Can everybody see that? It's a little bit tough, a little small probably. Just to get people oriented, here's the Clark Fork River, here's the ballpark, and this is generally the Champion Mill site. What we've done is we've gone through a series of charrettes and meetings with the public and iterations on the design and the planning of this site. One of the important things is just the constraints that exist on the site, and they're substantial. We have floodplain issues. We have up to 20 to 30 feet of wood chip waste along the riverfront. We have an irrigation ditch that runs through the site, and lots of other issues pertaining to the old mill site that existed there for nearly 80 years, I would guess. And so what we've done is we've come up with a generally conceptual layout and land use plan that includes some components of residential. We've got some single family with a good, I think, mixture of residential, some more townhome, and some multifamily. And then we've got kind of an urban core that would be mixed use commercial area as well, that might be office and ground floor commercial, which is kind of in what we call our central core area. The project also includes pretty substantial trail connections. We've shown those here in black. Important component that we've heard from the neighborhood is looping trail systems and a well-connected trail system. We've got important connections with the California Street Bridge and McCormick Park Trail System, the old Milwaukee Trail System. So this area really serves as a hub for trails in our trail system. And so we spent a lot of time working on the trail and pedestrian design for the project. And this is starting to be, I think, a pretty nicely gelled plan for that. It's still, we're still working out the details on how those might look, the surfaces, how those are going to be designed, but generally this is the trail connectivity that we're looking for. Generally, we're looking at something around a 14-acre park along the riverfront that really connects or continues the plan for McCormick and integrates well, I think, with the McCormick plan. One of the key things that we've accomplished in the last month or two here, I think, is working on the issues of parking pertaining to the ballpark. The city and the ballpark have been working out those details, and what we've come up with is that we would do some parking immediately south of the parking lot, and then we've come up with this idea, this concept of providing parking along the ballpark on the west edge. And that parking would be kind of a mixed-use concept, where we're looking at that being parking for the park, 365 days a year, and then the 38 days a year that the ballpark has an event, they would have access to that parking. One of the other ideas that's come up and was brought up by the community, and we've explored a little bit further, is the idea of putting in some kind of river access boat ramp at this location. That's been a high priority for the community. We've heard that expressed numerous times through the public process, and I'm interested in getting people's input on that idea. We think that there's a unique opportunity here to provide this parking and then also provide parking for that boat ramp as well. That would be for non-motorized boats, basically rafts, canoes, drift boats, those kind of
Do you
things.
want a quick comment on that?
Sure.
You've got another diversion dam, piles of concrete, right opposite the baseball stadium. Yeah,
Right
there.
here, right.
So before you would develop a boat ramp down there, you'd have to do a project like they're doing now across from the Wilma to kind of clean it up to make it safe.
To clean this up
I ripped
for-
the bottoms out of my boats going across that.
Is that a raft or for canoes
It
or
was an inflatable kayak.
inflatable kayak?
So,
Okay.
yeah, I like the idea of a boat ramp down there, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying that
Yeah,
you have to make
we're-
improvements to that in order to be able to incorporate it.
All right, that's good comments. What's that?
Wouldn't the boat ramp be downstream of that?
It would, and I agree. This is This can be tough at low water. There's no doubt. This can be tough at low water. At high water, you know, there's some good standing waves in there. Most rafts can handle that, but at low water, I agree. That's a really good comment. And so what we've done is we've explored the opportunity to provide, to team with the Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, the Parks Department, and we're looking at applying for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks grant money to do a boat ramp access here. And if we're successful with the grant, we're going to ask for $75,000. We'll do some restoration of the riverfront there as well to try to take out some of the, this is basically an artificial berm along that was constructed when they did the sawmill here. We would like to take some of that out, all that sawdust out, and terrace the bank down toward the river to create a nice access where people can get down and actually touch the river and then take their boats out there safely as well. And so we're still working through the details on this, but I think this is a really exciting development. The other thing that we've come up with here is to not pave all of this parking, that we'd like to take about half of it and put it into what we call turf block, which is basically grass that is growing up through like block, you know, basically kind of they're big block tiles that come and they're porous and turf can grow up through them. And what that does is it basically allows you to park on it. It doesn't turn to mud when it's wet, but you're not paving and creating all of that extra pavement. It's porous, water can go into it. It's a pretty green kind of option for doing parking. We think that's really appropriate for the types of uses that we might have here for peak uses in the summertime. So that's one of the things I think that's exciting in development for the project. Other kind of things that are going on right now, just to bring everybody up to date in kind of a status here. The Missoula Redevelopment Agency is intimately involved in the project, and I think their board continues. They spent the last 2 months really working on the priorities of trying to redevelop this site. This is a difficult site, and so they continue to work through a process in trying to establish the priorities of the cleanup, the demolition, the way this whole thing is gonna transpire. And I think that's a work in process. I'm not sure that they've made decisions on how what those priorities are gonna be right now. In terms of other ongoing work, the voluntary cleanup plan is an important one that is a requirement of the, basically, because this is a brownfield site, we're in the process of preparing the voluntary cleanup plan that's been submitted to DEQ in Helena. We met again with DEQ this month and continue to work through a lot of the particulars related to cleanup of the site. Yeah.
Could you give a brief update on that? I'm under the impression that either the DEQ or the EPA sent you guys back to the drawing boards as far as your environmental assessment?
No, I wouldn't say that.
I.e. they put in numerous new subsurface sampling sites, required subsurface well sites to be drilled along California Street.
Yeah, there was a requirement, and this is not my expertise, but I'm familiar with it. So the issues related to the site is manganese that creates a taste and odor issue in the water. It's not a public health issue at all, and it's only in the top groundwater. And that manganese is coming from the wood chips. The wood chips basically oxidize and deteriorate. They interact with the mineral content of the soil, and it leaches out the manganese, and it basically causes a kind of a woody nutrification taste in the groundwater. Now and that has been identified on the site. That's for surface water wells. We did pretty substantial testing around the site and did not find elevated manganese levels around the site. So it's limited to certain areas on the site, and we're working through a process of how to mitigate or solve that issue, and how significant is the issue. So,
just to further, do you have information on the update on those additional subsurface drill sites that they put in?
Yes.
And when will that be available? Because I believe there's a public comment period coming up for the
Voluntary
environmental
clean.
assessment plan.
Yeah, as soon as that's submitted and the DEQ has their opportunity to look at it again and make sure that they're ready to go, then I believe there's a 60-day comment period. So that should be forthcoming. That submittal to DEQ should be forthcoming fairly quickly here. I would guess in the next month. We're hoping this month. But you know, the other issue really pertains to methane gas leaching out of the wood chips, and there is some elevated methane gas in this area, and they're putting in sensors right now to figure out what the extent of that is and how we might mitigate it. Removing all of the chips on this site costs somewhere between $500,000 and $1 million at minimum. I guess I wouldn't even say all of the chips. It's enormously expensive to remove all the chips. And so we're trying to figure out the best way to work through these issues. And are they really issues? That's what we don't know now.
Who might remove those chips in that where you're designating that on the map is the land that's apparently going to be given to the city?
Well, this becomes the park area.
Which would be
and
city property?
it would be a city park, right.
Would the city be responsible for that cleanup, or is that going to happen ahead of time?
It'll happen to the extent necessary prior to that. And we're not really sure that they need to come out. We're trying to establish compatible land uses, and we're looking right now at transferring as much of this as we can to eco-compost, to recycle it, and they're very interested in the chips. They're clean, but we're trying to work through a process of doing that, and then exactly how many chips can they take, and some of those issues as well. So it's a bit in a state of flux at this point. So
As far as soil chemistry, how different is the wood chip layer than like the layer of forest floor, where you have degrading trees?
well,
Having
it's
the wood chips in there, it doesn't
right.
sound like it's.
I think it's the quantity. You know, it's 20 feet and where they're saturated. The other thing that we're doing is we're lining this irrigation ditch. This ditch, we think, is probably, in fact, when we drilled along it, we hit water that was probably coming out of that ditch. And so we're going to line this with a bentonite layer so that we think that ditch is contributing to the saturation of the wood chips. If they're dry and they're not in the groundwater, it's not a problem. It's where they're saturated that this manganese leachate thing occurs.
See a time when those ditches will be filled up?
What's that?
Will we see a time when those ditches will be filled up? I don't think so.
Not in my lifetime. They have seniority over everybody. They were coming here first, and we've met with the ditch company and spent quite a bit of time working on it. We're going to clean it up, try to make it more of an amenity through the site, make it as safe as we can through the sites.
Did you say how many parking spots do you imagine for that chunk? You know, that boat ramp and the asphalt area?
The city has a commitment of 250 spaces for play ball in the ballpark, and so that's what we're looking at right now. Now, there's a number of different scenarios with parking because we're looking at what we call mixed-use parking and shared-use parking, where we might be able to have some of that parking overlap with the commercial uses. But at a minimum, the city's responsible for providing 250 for the ballpark. And then the other commercial businesses will have some there as well. Long term, we're thinking there might even be a parking structure at this site, but that's still a little bit up in the air. We're doing a market analysis and looking at the feasibility on that.
All of this residential, commercial, and recreational activity comes to fruition on this space. What is the traffic demand management as far as like flow in and out of the whole area?
Good lead-in. That's my next topic. So it's perfect. We are in the process of preparing a traffic study for the site. We've done all of the existing counting, and we've met with the neighborhood. We know traffic's a huge issue, and there's a couple of things for traffic management strategy that we're looking at. One is that Craig Lane to Wyoming Street be our main focus in getting people out of there, and we're really not interconnecting much. Now, we like interconnecting streets, residential, but there's no through streets that really connect to the neighborhood to the south. So that's one of the things. We're looking at that Craig Lane to Wyoming is the main collector to get folks in and out of the site.
So that would become an actual road then? All the way
Yes,
across?
yes,
Okay.
you bet. And we believe, we're leaning toward a recommendation of a signal at Craig Lane and Orange Street. Now, and we think that that's a good traffic management tool because, that's going to facilitate people getting in and out of there. Signals are a tricky deal because you can't put in a signal until the traffic's there to warrant it, and that's by law. And the Montana Department of Transportation has strong jurisdiction over that. So we're going to go through a process of warranting this signal, and it can't be warranted on traffic projections. It has to be actual traffic. So we're leaning toward that recommendation. I think that it's only a matter of time before a signal is warranted there. But I've said that about other places in Missoula, and they're still not in. So it is only a matter of time, we believe. The other issue is who pays for it. The development here will be responsible for a portion of the traffic at that signal, but it's certainly a regional benefit. And I don't know if you're aware, but the city of Missoula is looking at a process for identifying traffic impact fees for the greater Missoula area, and specifically the Wymullen area, and that might be a good application here as well. So that's one of the strategies for traffic management that we're looking at. The other one is that the city parks department has made a commitment to finish Craig Lane from where it ends near the McCormick Park entrance to basically the railroad right now. We're looking at putting a bit of a curve in it to slow traffic down, and they're also committed to realigning Hickory to kind of button hook it and make it less apparent as a through street and kind of discourage traffic from going down Hickory. So we'll be rebuilding that.
Because it seems like there are two different plans here that maybe are not working too well together, because I'm pretty sure that the park plan that I saw at one of these meetings had a traffic circle or roundabout there.
Yeah, the traffic circle was at the McCormick entrance. And, we've met with the fire department and those folks, and what we're leaning toward is maybe a little different section and way to calm the traffic, and we still need to work this out. The circle is a traffic calming device. I'm not sure it's the appropriate traffic calming device for that location, and I think there's other appropriate potential calming. One is we're looking at maybe doing a very wide landscape median on Craig Lane all the way into the underneath the bridge and into this development, and that would be 16 to 18 feet wide and would create a parkway street with no parking on the sides, and move the traffic out to the edge. You'd have probably a bike lane, and that would be it. Or maybe no bike lane and just really try to narrow it down so the traffic slows down through this. So that when people come in here, the landscape median and the landscaping on both sides said you're in a park. So that's one of the concepts. That doesn't work as well with a roundabout. It's hard to do both because just of the geometry. And
Brett, I'm just curious what you just said. I might not be hearing well back here, but did you say that you were talking about making 2 lanes with a big wide median and no parking on either side?
Yeah.
And that you thought that was slowing traffic? What I've learned about traffic is that the more chaos that you cause, the slower the driver goes. So say if you had cars parked along the side, people would be slowing down because they wouldn't know like it's a clear shot.
you're
If
absolutely
there's
right.
grass, you're gonna go fast.
You're
Not
right.
just road. So
But-
it feels clear.
But how many times have you seen cars parked solid all the way up there? You have to have the land use to do what you're talking
Right,
about.
I was just curious about
Right.
the comments.
So what we're trying to do is we're trying to push those cars out right next to the sidewalk so that that creates that same kind of friction with a narrow lane. So,
You want some kind
Luann?
of friction.
I'm trying to picture Craig Lane to Wyoming, and are you just going through this development? I'm very concerned about the people just east of Russell. Is this gonna be a shortcut now for people from Russell to get over to Orange? How's that gonna work? I mean, how are we gonna make it so this is just a neighborhood street? Or do we assume that it's gonna become a major street through town?
well, I don't know about how major, but it is a collector street, and we've talked about this quite a bit. We're looking at a fairly major commercial area here, and not major, I wouldn't say, but like a neighborhood commercial, and for that, to make that viable, we're looking at, having some traffic and diagonal parking on the street. So we want that to look like a fairly vibrant place, not big, high, wide street, and we're looking at fairly narrow sections here.
I'm just curious how that's gonna interface with a park where you're supposed to go for peace and relaxation. Is it gonna be kind?
It's off of the park quite a bit, so.
It will be off the park?
Yeah, there's a separate Parkway Street that comes off of that and goes to Idaho Street, so.
Would you have any north and south roads going through there?
Sure, yeah, we have a traditional kind of extension of the grid pattern with north-south streets and east-west streets that interconnect.
Well, how far west are we talking about when you talk about the north-south?
Just to the property line on
what is the
west
property
side. Well, it varies. It's California Street on a couple of blocks, and then a couple of other blocks have been developed. There's existing residential, so it's kind of a half a block off of California Street.
Yeah, I was wondering because I live on 2nd Street, just off of California there, and I was wondering, we're getting a lot of traffic on California Street because I think a lot of people are wanting to avoid the intersection at Russell.
I think they are.
At 3rd Street, so
Right.
what I'm wondering is how much of this California Street would they be utilizing for this north-south route?
I think that traffic that's cutting through there now to avoid that signal will probably use Wyoming and Craig. And I just don't think there's any way we can avoid that. We can design for it and then benefit from it as well. What I see is that I think it will offload 3rd Street. I really think you're going to see a reduction in traffic at 3rd, and the traffic will equilibrate between this Wyoming, Craig, and 3rd. And so instead of having all of that traffic on 3rd, I think you'll see it now split two ways, and that will reduce 3rd Street. That's my intuition. How much? It's hard to say, I think.
Well, my problem is where I live on 2nd Street, west of California Street. And the road narrows from 2nd Street to 3rd Street in there.
Right.
And it's a bottleneck right in there. When I'm trying to pull out of my street to get onto California to get out, either go south or north.
Yeah, traffic is a big issue. We're really trying to discourage that traffic from going that direction. There's no doubt.
Brent, would you also think about a stoplight at Wyoming and Russell?
That would be planned with the Russell Street project. So I think that is already basically part of their plan.
And do we have any traffic counts from 3rd Street that are recent?
Pretty much DOT counts it every year.
Do you know what they are?
I think they're like 5,000 cars a day.
Is that all?
5,000 to 6,000. Yeah, I think so. And I think this street is going to be an important access for the whole neighborhood to get to the new aquatic center too. I mean, this aquatic center is going to be a fairly nice facility for the community, and everybody coming from this part of town will be using that Craig, Wyoming. So, the street has multiple functions. I think it's an important connection, though, for us to provide, and I really do think it'll help traffic in the neighborhood. Let's put it on this collector and get it going east-west.
What do you know about the Russell Street Bridge, and as that goes, how is that going to affect the phasing of your traffic flows?
You know, that's kind of a peripheral project, and I prefer to kind of stay on this subject if we could.
Well, actually, it's central because, see, everybody needs to make right turns nowadays. You can't make left turns,
Yeah.
or especially at uncontrolled intersections. So, as you're heading out of Wyoming or Dakota, you make a right turn because the bridge is new. Then you're going to be heading out to Third, and you're going to be making a right turn on Third, and then going down to Reserve.
Well,
you know.
with the signal should accommodate the access on both Craig Lane and Wyoming and Russell for getting out onto those
Any
streets.
chance to
So
get
in the
the
phasing, the signal will be
right?
Hold on. What's that?
That south end of Hickory is very narrow, though. Any chance of getting that widened?
South end of Hickory.
Yeah, that is right there.
Right. That's kind of beyond the project limits. I think most people are probably interested in seeing that narrowness to kind of facilitate calming of the traffic.
I bet back out of that place every time. Meet traffic.
Okay, you know what,
Mike?
we're gonna have to move on at this point. I apologize for a miscommunication. We have Dale McCormick from the planning for a few minutes here to go over the process of how all this is happening.
There you go.
And I wanted to thank Brent for all your time and jumping in and filling in.
So Dale's going to take where we're going from here.
Yeah, Dale's gonna help us from there. And you're with the Office of Planning.
Yeah. Can people hear me okay in the back without the microphone? Okay. My name is Dale McCormick. I'm with the City County Planning Office, and I have some handouts that I'll be referring to. There's 25, so if people can share. If you want additional copies, my phone number is 258-3803. Briefly, what I wanted to describe is just kind of where we're at in terms of the process now and what the steps are that need to be gone through to get to where the developer can start creating a neighborhood down there. And there's a resolution, the number is 6972, that is a resolution that the city adopted on the 12th of September 2005. And what that did is, you can see here the zoning is CI2, which is county I2. I2 zoning is heavy industrial. When that resolution was adopted, what it did is annex that property into the city as an equivalent heavy industrial I2 zone. As part of that resolution, there were also two conditions. One that was that by December 1st, 2007, that the transfer of property occur from the current owners to the developer, and also that a plat be filed for redevelopment of the property. So that's a deadline that's out there, and that's part of this resolution of annexation. So right now the property is I2, which does not allow residential to occur on it. So because of that, there needs to be two processes that occur. One is the rezoning of the property from heavy industrial to what's called a special district, that would be a zoning district unto itself, that would have very specific standards about building heights and setbacks and uses and all the things that a normal zoning district would have. And the second thing that will need to occur is a subdivision process, which will create individual lots that can be sold and transferred to property owners for development. And so what I did is, in this handout, the first page has what's called the mixed-use commercial and residential neighborhood standards from the growth policy, that's the applicable growth policy, which is the Southside Riverfront Comp Plan Amendment. And the reason I wanted to include those is that in order to make a zoning change, the second page at the top says findings of fact. Number one is whether the zoning is compatible with the comprehensive plan. Well, the comprehensive plan is the growth policy, and that's this page. So the change to the zoning needs to look to the growth policy. It's not a regulatory document, but it's the guideline from which the zoning district standards are created. And so, for instance, when on the front page, it talks about architectural continuity with similar building features on the street, designed streets to complete and connect the existing grid pattern, what Brent was just talking about, to the connection to the surrounding neighborhood, establish a neighborhood center in the center of the planning area along Wyoming Street between California Street and the railroad, establish traffic calming features along the east-west collector, which connects Craig Lane to Wyoming Street. Another thing that's interesting, it says buildings should be highest in the neighborhood center and at gateways along Russell Street at 45 feet, but that maximum height of buildings be 35 feet for all areas except the Russell Street corridor in the neighborhood center. So there's some starting points for the zoning district standards that the developer will bring to the planning office that will accompany this. So really this is more of the subdivision aspect of it, but with that there'll be zoning district standards that say buildings can't be more than 3 stories, need to be set back, and it can only have certain uses, like commercial uses would be permitted on the first floor, the second floor may be only office or residential. Those kinds of standards will be in the special zoning district. Then the third step, so you've got the annexation and then the special zoning district, and then the subdivision, which is the third page in this handout. This kind of outlines what the process is. It's got steps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. We're at step 2. And basically there still is a lot of opportunity for public comment, and the proposal in this form, when it comes to our office, it needs to be certified, which is step 3. And once it's certified, then it goes out to a whole variety of agencies like the Public Works Department, the Fire Department, Parks and Recreation Department, and they have an opportunity to weigh in on it and to see if it meets their expectation of what the proposal should be based on what their goals are. And after that agency review period, which is 15 working days, the developer has an opportunity to revise the proposal, or if the proposal isn't revised, then there can be conditions of approval of that proposal that staff may recommend to the planning board, that then would in turn get recommended by the planning board to the city council. So the city council ultimately can say, well, Parks and Recreation would like to see X, Y, and Z, and the city council have the final authority to judge what they think is appropriate conditions at that time, or the developer has the opportunity to say, hey, this is what the expectation was. The fire department says this intersection isn't working quite well, so we're going to redesign it so that it meets the expectation of the fire department. So there's 60 working days between the time that it goes to our department as a certified project to when the city council has to act on it. And so that's under step 4 to step 6, you see there. And then the last page is the criteria, similar to the 12 criteria for zoning. When the city council makes their final decision on this, their decision needs to have a basis in state law. And so with the zoning, these are the 12 criteria set out in state law, which include the comprehensive plan, whether it will lessen congestion in the streets, whether it promotes health and general welfare, whether it will secure safety from fire and other dangers. These are things that the city council needs to take into consideration in their decision. Similarly with the subdivision, creating the lots on the property, compliance with the zoning and the comprehensive plan. So that means if there are zoning district standards, then they need to create lots that conform with the zoning district standards that they create. Also effects on agriculture and agricultural water user facilities. Brent talked about the irrigation ditch and maintaining that flow. So those are things that state law requires that get reviewed during the process. Also, surveying requirements, local services, public health and safety, so all of those issues about road width and ease of access, and legal and physical access. So these are the criteria that are used to judge both the rezoning of the property from I-2 to this special district, and also to create the lots that will be sold and developed at the end of the process. And so if people, if you want, if people want copies of this, let me know. Or if you have questions about this after you've had a chance to look through it. During the period where it actually has been scheduled and goes before the planning board, neighbors that, well, the neighborhood council will get the packet that's been certified, and we'll have a chance to review it at that time. Also, prior to the planning board hearing, 2 weeks prior to that, the adjacent property owners will receive notification by certified mail of what the proposal is, so that they will have an opportunity to comment on it and are guaranteed to know when it has been scheduled for action by the planning board and the city council. So I think that covers most of the process, and like I said, if you have questions as we go along, feel free to give me a call. My phone number again is 258-3803. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. Good job, you did that really well in a short period of time. I'm sorry I missed that. It says right there on the thing, City of Missoula rep. Anyway, now's the time where we're going to talk a little bit about the ballpark, and from the neighborhood council leadership team, we're going to have Glenn Hoppy speak for a few moments to let you know what we're doing, and then after that we're going to let Matt Ellis from Play Ball and Missoula Osprey speak. So here's Glenn. Thanks. And now's a good time to get out your little sheets on questions you might have. We're going to take any questions and fill them out.
I have some of your responses just in the category of how has the ballpark impacted your quality of life? Do you have any suggestions for the city or Play Ball and how they might reduce the impact on the neighborhood around the Civic Stadium? We've had 2 seasons with the ballpark, and they've taken suggestions and made some improvements. But some of us still have complaints, suggestions, and I believe we're posing a hearing at City Council to discuss some of these. And it's going to it's going to A&F or a committee. I haven't had a chance to talk with Bob.
The process is that the use and policy manual is supposed to be reviewed annually. That process is supposed to take place at the neighborhood meeting before January 15th, and any changes to the policy are supposed to be established before March 1st. I don't know that that's possible to do in the timeline, but maybe you could.
Okay.
It kind of depends on what we're trying to.
This is Bob Jackman. He's one of our council representatives here, and Stacy Rise here too. So this is the Missoula Civic Stadium policy, or manual of policies, and we have the civic. It's the usage agreement. So one thing that can happen, our rights as citizens, is to challenge what's going on in here, and this is. This manual outlines what's supposed to happen for sound, for traffic, for different issues. And so we'd like to have this looked at. There's some things in there. And I'd kind of like to open up at this point just to see what your comments are. How has it affected you? You could even read what you just wrote. Yes?
I haven't written anything yet. Noise, particularly from the PA systems. Now, it would seem that the problem would be solved easily in that when they have events at the stadium, other than the Osprey game, the noise doesn't seem to be nearly as bad. It seems to be particularly the PA system and the announcer that seems to be generating a lot of noise, which is affecting my part of the neighborhood. If that can just be turned down, and I have called in numerous times to suggest that.
Why don't you
The
have
problem-
hands of everybody that agrees with that?
Hands of people who agree with the sound issue in the PA, okay? And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. So
Can I just
18
add a
people.
comment to that? It's not just the noise, it's this constant selling of products and stuff. It's this constant hype. It's the voice that goes up to sell you the car at a reduced price. It's that constant, that's that kind of noise. It's not just a home run. We could all deal with that. There aren't that many of them. But the constant, especially by the Oscar, but it's the constant selling this stuff. It's exhausting.
Okay.
That seems unnecessary.
Okay.
And it pierces. It comes in like,
It's not constant, it's
not always constant, but it shoots at you and it just interrupts everything over and over and over if you're out in your yard.
I'm just finding some words here. Okay, yes?
My name's Ron. I have a background in audio, and I'm a baseball fan. And I live like 2 blocks from the stadium. And I've gone to a lot of games, and I cannot for the life of me figure out why they have the speakers oriented the way they do. They're up on the poles, they're facing down, but they're facing, basically they're facing the neighborhood.
Facing
And
south,
they're-
facing south and west.
Yeah, and that can be pretty easily solved with not a lot of money and just a little bit of trial and error. I'm sure they can get the dispersal they need to their crowd, and they can cut down a lot of what leaks out into the neighborhood.
Agreed, absolutely.
We were promised a state-of-the-art sound system and big sound cannons way up in the air like that. It's not state-of-the-art. It's objectionable.
Okay.
Use
Can
the
I,
little speakers that they have. They have them there. They don't need the big ones.
change speakers.
Well, they have them. I mean, they're using 2 different sorts of speakers. They don't need the PA ones.
Oh, skip, big one?
Yep.
Okay.
When I'm out walking on the river trails or whatever, I really enjoy the sounds from the stadium. It's a lot like walking by the bridge and smelling the pizza. It's a sensory experience that I enjoy. I consider it as a benefit of being.
Okay.
It's not as
Find me a word. Charming?
Just that it's positive.
Romantic.
That it's
Okay.
Nostalgic.
No, back there?
Whatever happened to the canopy that's supposed to be installed over the stadium? It seems like that would help contain the noise.
Is that how you spell canopy?
Yeah, but it's not how you spell noise.
Oh, I've been doing this since the 2nd grade. I have to correct it every time. I want to change it with a C. I'm working on that lobby, but, okay, yes.
I agree with the constant selling of stuff. I don't want to be constantly hearing you buy Coca-Cola, but I love the sound of the baseball stadium. I love being out in the backyard with gardening. I love hearing the crowd roar. It's a nostalgia thing. I grew up with baseball games. I personally really enjoy it.
Okay, I'll just be in and give it the N word. I've been talking to a few people, and one of our complaints is it's hard to address our complaints. You can call the ballpark, maybe they'll be there, maybe it'll register. We were told to call 911 with our quality of life complaints, and I think quite a few of us have done that. But it seems inefficient. We thought maybe if there's a third-party person, sound monitor, who could take our complaints, translate them, to kind of work with the ballpark a little better or insist on things. And so that was one suggestion that's come up that I thought would be useful, because that's, I think, part of my frustration is, do I have to call 911? And, and I I've noticed an improvement, but for me, at 10:30 at night, we still have, I live 3 blocks away, and I've been woken up. Yes?
I live in the neighborhood when Champion Sauna was running 24/7. And with 18-wheeler logging trucks working their way through our neighborhood all the time with J brakes and everything. And while I no longer live in the neighborhood, I agree with the perception that people have there about acoustically redirecting the speakers and making it less onerous to the neighborhood. But in the historical context of what was there, these few incidences of noise seem pretty paltry compared to what we had there not that many years ago. I just want to know that.
Relative, it's all relative. Okay. So these are concerns, problems. We would like to, I guess, address those to the powers that can do things. Yes?
Mine isn't actually a concern or a problem. I live at 319 South 5th Street, right here around the corner, and I can hear the ballpark, and I can hear Terrace Park, and I can hear the fire engines, and it's one of the great things about living in town. I would like to say, and this is how I answered your question, but the ballpark has been a very positive addition to our neighborhood. A blighted brownfield site has begun to undergo an urban redevelopment, and I think that the ballpark was the catalyst to that. We have a large hole in the middle of Missoula, which is now going to be a vibrant, wonderful place for people to go and to live and to shop and to be entertained. The stadium provides low-cost fun and entertainment for families. And I'm, as a neighborhood resident, very proud of the stadium. I think I need to say also that I serve on the board of directors of Play Ball, which is one of the boards that I have joined recently after having served on the board of directors of Montana Community Development Corporation, Homeward, and Montana Natural History Center, which is right next door.
Thank you. Yes?
Well, we can agree with that, but we also have a solvable aggravation with this noise. It's not unsolvable. So for the board or a board member just to say, well, it's good for the city, so put up with it, isn't an answer I want to hear.
That wasn't what I was saying. I was making a positive comment in the face of what seemed to be a lot of sort of negativism.
All right.
I just want it to be better. Okay, I'm not supposed to speak my personal thing, but yes.
I think what you mentioned is a good point in that after 10 o'clock, the noise should go down considerably for those of us who have to sleep and go to work the next day.
Okay. Yes?
Do people have a right to make noise, or do they have a right to peace and quiet? I think that's what's important.
Well, in the policy, in the use agreement, they did give the ballpark kind of exemption from the noise ordinance. And you can take a look at that. We do have the use agreement and the policy manual. I think extra's up there. Before I go, there's one more suggestion on the traffic that we need some help with the blocking of Hickory. That's not working real well. So Beth is probably trying to shoot me out of here because it is time. And thanks. If you have any more suggestions, we're gathering these, and I think we will bring it up with Bob and Stacy to see what we can do, and also work with the ballpark. So I'm through, and I believe Matt's next.
I want to thank Glenn. Good job. It is a difficult issue to find the happy medium, and it seems like the sound is the major concern, but if you have other issues as well that we haven't brought up here, we could take just a minute if there's any other issues.
Do you have an update on the viability of the stadium as a whole?
I don't know.
In that it is, last I heard, and it may be a while ago, and outdated, that they were running in a considerable debt. Has that improved? Is it just
You know what?
it's waiting in the Civic Stadium?
That's out of my realm, and I have no idea, but we have Matt Ellis here from the Osprey, and he is welcome to come speak.
Just like Joe Eason.
And Joe Eason, too. And, yeah. Okay, great. We'll let Joe answer that.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Joe Easton with Play Ball Missoula, and I've met many of you. The first question was viability of the stadium, and it is a work in progress. It is a construction site. We have construction debts and we have a construction budget. We continue to raise money to build additions onto this ballpark and pay for what we have built. So it is an ongoing process. There was also a question about the canopy. The canopy is still in our long-range plans, but to be clear and frank with you, we have priorities for completing the buildings such as the restrooms and the concession stands and the locker rooms first. So the canopy is still on our long-range plans. I do want to say as an overall comment, both the Ellises and I have come to several of these meetings, and we will continue to do so. There is a line with the noise of the ballpark between providing the service of the sound of the ballpark and being obnoxious to your neighborhood. And I'll continue to be open to suggestions such as this person here said he was an audio expert and also a baseball fan. That might be a possibility. The reason that those speakers are in that location is because they were directed sound. The reason that we don't have a single blowtorch in center field blasting sound back out is that is an inefficient use. But we've heard consistently and tried to mitigate through certain ways of turning the volume down, changing the tone of the announcer's microphone. And I do know for a fact, because I insist upon it as a fan and as a member of Play Ball Missoula, that the announcer's microphone and tone and tactics change as the game goes on. Everybody all of us have been to a baseball game understand that it's not necessarily needs to scream at the 7th inning the way that he tried to rile the crowd up in the 3rd inning. So there are changes in the game as he goes forward. I am willing and Play Ball's willing over the lifetime of this project and this ballpark to listen to your complaints. Quite frankly, though, all impacts to your neighborhood are not going to be mitigated. You will hear the ballpark, you will hear crowd noise, you will hear the PA, you will have additional cars go through your neighborhood. How can we best mitigate and still service the ballpark, the traffic, the sound, and the fans, and all of you? It's a delicate balance, and I'm not here saying that we have all the answers today, but we'll continue to come to these meetings and work it out. And while I think the manual of policies and the use agreement are good in their current condition, we follow them. We are a thriving organization, but we continue to make change to the ballpark. I see you're trying to raise your hand, so go ahead.
I just wanted to ask if you guys are running shuttles from the parking garage downtown to your facility?
There hasn't been a call for that right now. We have more than enough parking in our temporary use at the mill site. For those of you who don't know, we've been parking cars on the ground-up asphalt right next to the large warehouse. And we continue to have more and more people bike and walk to the games. So until we fill up that parking lot next to the warehouse, I know people park up Craig Lane, which is unfortunate. I would like to see that changed, but you just heard tonight that will probably continue.
And McCormick Park.
Well, McCormick Park, we have a sign out front that discourages us, and we just rely on human nature to even follow it.
It does not work. They have thrown that.
I understand that, and that's truly beyond our control. The McCormick Park, we cannot dissuade any further the parking that goes on there. It is an open parking lot, and to have a police officer at the opening of the McCormick parking lot like we do at Hickory and River would be a poor waste of.
Could you make announcements during the game that parking is prohibited
Yes.
in that area?
I think we do make a general announcement at the beginning about where you should and should not park, but admittedly, maybe that catches 75% of the fans, but Stacy.
Oh, I just wanted to say that I play softball down at McCormick Park every week in the summer, and quite often we're playing over at McCormick while there's baseball games going on. And I personally have not had any problem finding parking in McCormick when there's a baseball game. The first couple months that the stadium was open, I really kind of worried about it, thinking, oh, everybody's going to park over here now. It really hasn't been a problem for the people that recreate in McCormick Park. And David we play on the same team, and David.
I would second that.
Okay. And Joe, I did have a quick question. Can I ask you a quick question? Okay. Do you have any idea how many people are taking different modes of transportation to the park rather than vehicles?
This is going to be my own observations. I would say that a 200 set bicycle rack is full every night. I walk to the ballpark and I live 2 blocks that way, and I'm walking on a busy trail towards the ballpark. I don't have a percentage, but last year the Osprey averaged 1,700, and so I think it's fair to say that a quarter of that crowd got there not in a car.
That's fairly substantial.
I think so.
Yeah.
What's your long-range parking plan once the temporary lot disappears?
Yeah.
You want something right now?
No, I'll use this. As you heard Brent say, we've been involved with WGM and the owners of the mill site. Parking's a big deal for us, and not only does it lessen the impact on the neighborhood, but it is a fan amenity. So the number one complaint that you'll hear from fans about the ballpark now is having to walk from that temporary lot, which is so my response to them, of course, is don't drive. But the plan is, forgive me for mangling this, these 2 blocks here will be a parking lot specifically only for the ballpark. We will control traffic into through Craig Lane underneath the underpass into these 2 blocks here. So that's 180-ish spots as it's drawn right now. Then we will also have the ability to pinch off access to this parking lot. You can't see it even from that table, but there is a paved parking lot here with a roundabout here to that boat ramp, and then here's what Brent was talking about, the grass block. So if you pinch traffic here and here, we'll be able to control 300-ish so spots per night.
Enough?
I do think it's enough. We continue to discourage cars. The Osprey have ticket promotions in place. We have a program with the Bike Ped Board. We have agreements with lots around within a 15-minute walk of the ballpark. There's that balance that you've heard me talk about for years now, which is we don't want to provide 1,000 parking spots because then 1,000 cars will drive. My personal opinion, and I realize it's difficult, but I think every year we'll get less and less people trying to turn on Hickory and Cottonwood coming to the ballpark because they'll remember last summer they tried to do that, they got stopped and turned around. So I think we'll start to ingrain some behaviors where they'll make the big turn around 3rd, Orange, Craig, and come in. So
how about your major events, ones that'll hold like 5,000 people or
that's a different opportunity.
So flood the neighborhoods?
No.
Where will they come from?
I know you're trying to make a point, but we will take more responsibility to maintain and operate the crowd if we get an event that large. Then we start to involve the parking lots across the river. We involve the depot. We involve all sorts of different park and ride opportunities that aren't necessary for the crowds that are coming to the Osprey game now.
I'd also like to mention with that, I'm on, as a representative of the Neighborhood Council Leadership Team, I'm on the Extraordinary Events Committee, so we have a representative from the neighborhood on that committee, as well as the Neighborhood Council Community Forum has a representative on that committee as well to help ensure these kinds of issues. And one other thing was that we wanted to try to work out an arrangement to have permanent signs installed that will help notify people of access to the stadium and not no access.
We would support that. Last year, the city and Play Ball shared the cost on those A-frame standards, and they lasted about 4 days. We would support going with your neighborhood to council and finding the money to put permanent signage somewhere on the entrances to 3rd and Hickory, Orange and River or First, those major entrances. You grimace, Stacy, so I know what you're saying.
No. I want to go back to the bike rack.
Okay.
Can you put in some more bike racks? Because it's hard to park a bike down there.
Yeah. Yes.
So I mean, it was just, please.
Yes.
Hold on, we're also, along the bike rack thing real quick, long ones for the people with the trailers.
Yeah.
And we're we got, Tracy's just dying, so we're gonna let Tracy, but then Matt wants to speak and we're gonna have to wrap up and take other comments or anything.
You have them make an announcement at the beginning of the game as to the appropriate places to park. Do you include a message about not parking in the neighborhood and trying to go to an appropriate parking lot?
We've run full-page ads showing how to get to the ballpark and both the independent and Missoula. We're like part of previews for the season. We've seen full maps on where the parking is, where our other lots are, and I'll make sure that happens again this year.
I think it would be nice to specifically ask them to not park in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I think the announcement is
We can do announcements too. To be honest with you, we monitor the neighborhood by driving. I actually get in my car, drive the neighborhood, and we noticed a major decrease in the number of cars in your neighborhood last season. We made a lot of changes. Okay?
Yeah,
We put a police officer on Hickory River instead of having one of our staff members because, as I told, we hosted a meeting like this in January. We had a limited turnout. I want to thank everybody. This is great. It's a lot better to talk about what we can do to improve things than talk about how we got here. I just really appreciate that discussion. First of all, one of the things we were told last year is that it was tough, and it was tough for us too. We had 4 or 5 people quit, the first year because we had our own staff doing it, and they had no power. And there are people in your neighborhood who don't want that blockage there, and they should for sure let us know it. And so we actually put an officer there from that point on. And so we've committed an officer to that blockage, and we're going to continue to do so. And we think that's made a major difference in how many that cars don't go back and forth. So that's a big thing. The other thing on the bikes is we've always had a bike corral planned for the construction of the ballpark, and I'm still committed to that. I actually have had a person for the last 7 years ready to build it. They've already agreed that they want to be a part of it. And we were going to do like a wood corral and have bike racks in there, and it's going to be pretty extensive how many bikes we can get in. With the changing of the parking lot, with the development next door, we're going to have to reconfigure where that goes. So we've just been waiting to see the final piece of the parking so we can figure out where that's going to go. Because originally that was a part of the original parking lot plan. We were still committed to doing a bigger bike rack system. We just wanted to get the land to do it. We don't have access to that land. So that was that. I got 2 other quick things. I've never been afraid to talk to people about the ballpark. I've always answered things. Maintenance to the facility, all of our bills have been paid on maintenance to the facility. The city has not, as we promised, is not taking care of that facility. So basically, play ball Missoula, the debts that you're hearing about are construction. Construction's a constant process. I will say that the battle that we had with the ballpark, especially for the fundraising, so nobody wants that ballpark finished so that the sound is optimized and everything's done more than I do, okay? But the problem is it's money. So we're raising it, we're working hard, we got a great board, we got great volunteers, a lot of people have done a lot to raise money for this ballpark. But getting it done is the quickest way to mitigate sound, help bikes, and make parking better. So that's what we're working on very hard. And then I had a question. Somebody sent me an email, I don't know if they're in this room, about the Riverfront Trail. A lot of people are using the trail, which is great. And they asked me about the plastic bags that are on the side of the river. And I told them I'd get back to them. And basically what they are is they're there because of the construction. They have to be there for a certain amount of time to make sure the soil takes for the hill and doesn't slide into the river. And somebody was asking us why we hadn't cleaned it up because it looks like trash. And it was put in by the MRA construction for the riverfront trails. And I just want to bring that up if that was somebody in this room who would ask about that. And that's all I had really. But I have 3 things I want to quickly offer. And I told Beth about these. Last year at our meeting that we had, I offered 3 items and nobody got back to me. I think the room was a lot of people who didn't like me too much, unfortunately. And I felt bad because it's 3 items that we really want to participate with. When I used to come to a lot of these meetings, I always heard trash in the neighborhood was a concern, having money to do things like mailing postcards and that kind of thing was a concern. So last year I offered three things, and I want to re-offer them this year. One would be a cleanup day in the neighborhood with our players, our front office staff, and also I'm going to hook Play Ball Missoula into make the board and all them do it as well. And what I'd like to do is host a barbecue at the stadium, my treat. We'll do it on a Saturday. It has to be a game day because I need my players in town, okay? So I'm looking at like a Saturday in August where we have the neighborhood, your families, your kids, come to the ballpark. I'll cook hamburgers and hot dogs for everybody. And then we'll go out and we'll hit the trails with bags, clean up the neighborhood as one, with players and fans and neighborhood people alike. And let's just knock that out if that's still an issue. If it's not an issue, we can can try to do something else with our time and maybe do something more as a neighborhood. So that's one thing I offer. Number two is we have what's called a 50-50 system. It's one of those obnoxious PA announcements you hear, where we have a nonprofit group take a homestand and they sell 50-50 raffle tickets and they keep the money. If this neighborhood council wants to take on a homestand, I will give you a homestand. Okay, so we have an application process. I have more people apply than we have spaces. So I will make sure you get one. As a council, it'll be about 5 to 6 games, depending on how our schedule breaks down. And you're going to have to staff it yourselves. We'll give you some guidelines on how it's done. And you would get to keep the 50%. The other 50% goes to the winning ticket. I have nothing to do with the money. You guys will manage the money. It all goes to you. You can take it with you when you leave. And then you can use it for different budgeted things. And then the third thing is a community corner program. We give out 20 tickets every night to nonprofit groups for free. And it's really for them to use however they want. It's an application process by letter. I want some of this neighborhood to go to games who haven't been to games. I want you to see how we operate. I'm very proud of our product. I'm proud of our crowd. One of the things, the misconceptions I get is that it's a bunch of beer drinking men. Okay? I need you to come to the ballpark and see that we're about families and kids. Okay? 4,000 kids reading books in a program where we have, thousands and thousands of books being read in the schools, and I'm sure any of you have kids that are involved in that. We give out $80,000 worth of prizes to kids in the area schools for tickets and different prizes. So we're very committed to youth, we're very committed to families. It's a family product. I really would like to have you come out. So you get one of those dates, you get 20 free tickets. You guys can come out, and then I'd even sit down with you a week later in the conference room and we can go over things you saw that you want me to change and try to work it out. But those are my offers, and you guys know where I'm at. Thanks, Beth.
Thanks, Matt. I also, two things. I just want to mention that as a mom of 2 young boys who like all sports, and I like to get out and have fun with them, I found that the Missoula Osprey Kids Club is the best deal in town. And it's really a fantastic program. And I'd like to thank you guys for inventing that, because we've seen a lot of games using that program. Also, I want to thank all of you for doing such a great job with this difficult issue and for sitting through this great meeting. We have a moment right now also. We're a couple minutes over schedule, but this is time to visit with your neighbors, and feel free to speak with, hold on one more second. There's the leadership team people. Raise your hand if you have any issues, public comment. You need to come talk to us. We love to help you out. And Joe?
I now rise as one of your neighbors. You probably read about the project I'm starting on the corner of 3rd and Ivy. The Saturday after that, the knockdown house in the back of the laundromat was arson. And it was arson rather violently. A propane tank was taken from an alley, whatever, opened up, and a magazine lit and let the propane fill up the building and catch fire. Our fire department did their job and put the fire out, and the building's going to come down, of course. But I bring it to you as a neighbor that it's out there. We've all read about the Blue Ribbon Auto Body arsons and a couple of other small arsons, and so my little knockdown was attacked as well. I talked with Kyle about it a couple of days after that. So I bring it to you as a neighbor to just be aware and watch your alley and put your propane tanks away and be aware. Thanks.
Could you public comment at all for anything non-related?
Yeah, that's a legal requirement, and I'm sorry I tried to let us all run off without doing that. This is a public comment moment here. If you have anything you need to say or bring up for the neighborhood.
Building a house down in 3rd California at 1135. Just over there tonight, somebody dumped a couch in the alley. I don't know what's going on there, but anybody needs eyes and ears, and I just hate to see that stuff happen to Joe. Just some dumb man stuff happening, but when kids start doing weird stuff like that, let's see what the next steps are.
Unfortunately, that whole area, California Street West, has traditionally been a dump. Between having maybe 15 cars removed last year, people just having couches moved off. So I don't think it's specifically aimed at you or something like that. Unfortunately, that area has seemed to be a repository for unwanted goods.
Couches and chairs right by the ball field in there all summer long.
have enough pride to pick them up and get them out of there. The city, the baseball people. I mean, everybody, 1,000 people a day walk right by them. It's nothing.
That's where I sleep at night.
Oh, even for you. I mean, but I just, it's always like, I'm ashamed of that. Folks, it costs much about a pickup truck here.
It's a nice place to be. Here a while back, I was in this building when the ceiling fell down.
Okay, do we have any more public comments?
I'll just end on a good note here. We, us over on 1st and 2nd Street near Hickory and Cottonwood, we got our traffic circles in about a year ago. Not quite. We're very happy about it. We like them very much. Hope you appreciate driving around. We don't care which way you drive around. Doesn't make any difference.
Follow the rest of the
Oh, I just want to make a comment. This may not be politically correct in the neighborhood, but I am still chafing about the fact that I cannot park on city streets in the University neighborhood. Those streets are there, they're curbed and guttered. They allow dispersed parking for all of us who pay for maintenance and construction of those streets. The University Homeowners Association has stopped me from parking on the streets that I pay for.
But that's
Now,
exactly what you're talking about in the neighborhood, about limiting this neighborhood.
now, that's what I'm getting to here. Please be careful in our assessment here, because the options are somebody building a huge, expensive, impervious surface parking area right near the floodplain of our beautiful river, or the neighborhood during short episodes of the year absorbing the parking on the city streets that are wide enough, curbed and guttered, and already paved to accept parking and residential and transportation use. Now, I don't think this is going to happen because, like many people who testified, people don't like to work to watch sports, so they're probably not going to walk very far. But I would like to put to the ballpark, and I'm not a ballpark, I don't watch sports, I'd rather participate in walking or something, but I don't think the defensiveness that they're having about letting people park in the neighborhood is well put. You know, the streets are there, the curb and gutters are there, and for these short episodes, I think allowing people to park and walk
Right.
throughout the neighborhood makes sense instead of a huge parking lot.
I think-
that doesn't do much.
I appreciate your point. I think just as my awareness goes, there's quite a few streets that aren't curbed and guttered in that area, and so folks have run into trouble. And my suggestion is to have people towed if their driveway is blocked and that sort of thing. And that's what needs to happen. There is a process where time will come. Do we have any others? I thought I saw one other hand. Yeah?
I wanted to say that Play Ball was great. These guys are real visionaries and do what they're doing. I mean, it's a tremendous financial risk to do it. Thank you. It's an awesome asset. I love it. I can't say enough about it. It's one of the greatest things I've ever done. I lived down there when I was a volunteer field.